Hello, welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you are watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. All right, so I want to give you guys an update on the phone call between Donald Trump, the U.S. president, and also Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine. As I let you guys know earlier, that Donald Trump and Zelenskyy were going to be holding a call to discuss this ceasefire, and also regarding the phone call yesterday with Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, also speaking to Trump. And Trump want to just kind of fill Zelenskyy in on how that phone call went. So we're going to talk a lot about that in today's video, and we'll start off with this topic that you see right here on your screen. Trump suggests taking control of Ukrainian power plants for security. Trump said that the U.S. could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants could be the best protection for that infrastructure. Okay, so interesting suggestion coming out from Donald Trump, and I'm going to show you guys an article that talks about this just briefly before we jump on over to X. We know that a lot of Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been destroyed. I think the company DTEK, which is a major energy institution inside of Ukraine, has claimed that like 80% of their facilities were destroyed already by Russian strikes. So Trump suggesting that maybe U.S. takes ownership over it, so that way the Russians cannot attack it anymore. So you guys can let me know how you feel about that, but we're going to talk about this some more as we move forward. So let's go to jump into this article real quick from AP. Trump suggests to Zelenskyy that the U.S. should take ownership of Ukrainian power plants for security. Okay, this is coming out today, March 19th, 2025. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said Wednesday that they had a constructive call about moving toward a ceasefire between Kiev and Moscow, with the White House suggesting the U.S. could take control of Ukrainian power plants to ensure their security. Trump told Zelenskyy that the U.S. could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise, according to a White House statement from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz that described the call as fantastic. Yeah, so apparently that's what we keep hearing a lot also from the Trump administration. They're saying this phone call just went absolutely fantastic. There were no issues with it. So we'll see how things move forward in regards to these talks. But so far, we're hearing that it was a pretty productive talk between Zelenskyy and Trump. And I think they talked for at least an hour, not nearly as long as he spoke to Putin, but for roughly about an hour, I believe. It says here, Trump added that American ownership of those plants could be the best protection for that infrastructure. And also down here, I want to show you this information real quick. Weeks after a disastrous Oval Office meeting between the two leaders that led to Trump temporarily pausing intelligence sharing and military aid to Ukraine, Trump and Zelenskyy had a very good conversation in which they joked around, according to a senior Ukrainian official who spoke on the condition of anonymity because he wasn't authorized to comment publicly. There was an emphasis during the call on how any ceasefire process would need to be monitored and how the negotiating teams would still need to resolve technical issues, said the official. During the call, Zelenskyy requested additional Patriot defense missile systems. Rubio and Waltz said Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. Okay, so that's some good news. Looks like Zelenskyy calling for more Patriot missile systems, which he has many times in the past, and Trump is open to working with him. Okay, so that's a good sign that the U.S. is back on a decent track with Ukraine in terms of helping them out militarily. Trump has made clear that quickly ending the war is top priority for his administration. His new administration, excuse me. He has repeatedly complained about the cost. The U.S. has sent Ukraine more than $180 billion in military and economic aid since the start of the war. The call came a day after Trump held similar talks with Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, who agreed not to target Ukraine's energy infrastructure, but refused to back a full 30-day ceasefire. So I'm going to show you guys a report that talks about this, that possibly indicates that that actually wasn't even a real ceasefire, or the limited ceasefire was not actually in effect. At least not yet. It hasn't been agreed to completely. It's just more been agreed in principle, is kind of what I understand here. According to the Kremlin, Putin made clear to Trump that there must be a halt to foreign military aid and intelligence sharing as any part of a deal. But White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt on Wednesday underscored that U.S. intelligence sharing in terms of defense for Ukraine would continue. Okay, so that's a big report right here. Also, from the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she's stating that U.S. intelligence sharing is going to continue to Ukraine. It is not going to be cut off, even though we're hearing from Vladimir Putin that he's demanding that not only intelligence sharing for Ukraine gets cut off from the West, but also a full cessation of military aid to Ukraine. Okay, so don't really have any news as to military aid if that's going to get cut off. I wouldn't assume that it would. But in terms of intelligence sharing for Ukraine, it does look like it will continue. So let's hop on over to X now, and I've got a few things I can share for you guys over here from Taylor Populars. The White House readout of President Trump's phone call with Ukrainian President Zelenskyy. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Okay, so let's take a look at this statement from Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz on a call with Zelenskyy. So it's kind of like a readout from the White House. You can see it dated here, March 19th, 2025, for immediate release. Today, President Donald J. Trump and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy had a fantastic phone conversation. President Zelenskyy thanked President Trump for a productive start for the work of Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. The meeting of senior officials from both nations significantly helped in moving towards ending the war. President Zelenskyy thanked President Trump for the support of the United States, especially with Javelin missiles that President Trump was first to provide, and his efforts towards peace. Leaders agreed Ukraine and America will continue working together to bring about a real end to the war, and the lasting peace under President Trump's leadership can be achieved. President Trump fully briefed President Zelenskyy on his conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin and the key issues discussed. They reviewed the situation in Kursk and agreed to share information closely between their defense staffs as a battlefield situation involved. President Zelenskyy asked for additional air defense system to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems. President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. Okay, so we heard about that already. And finally, the last parts here. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire. They agreed that this could be the first step toward the full end of the war and ensuring security. President Zelenskyy was grateful for President's leadership in this effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. Okay, so you can see he states here that the two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Okay, so now we've got Ukraine coming out and agreeing on this as well, which as of last night, we only had President Vladimir Putin from Russia stating that he was open to a partial ceasefire. So it looks like Ukraine is now open to that. But as far as I know, there's nothing set in stone yet. These are just statements coming out now. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelenskyy also thanked President Trump for continuing to push humanitarian concerns, including the exchange of POWs. He noted that they had just had a successful exchange and thanked for the president for his leadership. President Trump also asked President Zelenskyy about the children who had gone missing from Ukraine during the war, including the ones that had been abducted. President Trump promised to work closely with both parties to help make sure those children were returned home. Okay, so that's interesting because we had a report on that just today that we went over. During our update video with the Russia-Ukraine war, I let you guys know that the Trump team was basically pulling out of all the programs that were basically doing investigations into these missing children. Something like 30,000 Ukrainian children were abducted from eastern Ukraine during the duration of this war. So it looks like Trump did come out and say he's going to be working with both parties to ensure these children are returned back to Ukraine. They agreed all parties must continue the effort to make a ceasefire work. The presidents noted that the positive work of their advisors and representatives, especially Secretary Rubio, National Security Advisor Waltz, Special Envoy Kellogg, and others, the presidents instructed their teams to move ahead with the technical issues related to implementing and broadening the partial ceasefire. The presidents instructed their advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. The presidents emphasized that in further meetings, the teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing toward lasting peace and security. Okay, so overall, based on that statement, it sounds like things are moving in the right direction, but we'll see how things move forward in the future. Now from Volodymyr Zelenskyy, he put a statement on X in regards to this phone call. This is what he had to say. I had a positive, very substantive, and frank conversation with President of the United States, Donald Trump, and I thanked him for a good and productive start to the work for the Ukrainian and American teams in Jeddah on March 11th. This meeting of the teams significantly helped in moving towards ending the war. We agree with Ukraine that Ukraine and the United States should continue to work together to achieve a real end to the war and lasting peace. We believe that together with America, with President Trump, and under American leadership, lasting peace can be achieved this year. President Trump shared details of his conversation with Putin and the key issues discussed. One of the first steps towards fully ending the war could be ending strikes on energy and other civilian infrastructure. I supported this step, and Ukraine confirmed that we are ready to implement it. Our teams discussed this step in Jeddah. The American side also proposed an unconditional ceasefire in the front line, and Ukraine accepted this proposal as well. We will continue working to make this happen. We believe that such steps are necessary to create the possibility for a comprehensive peace agreement to be prepared during the ceasefire. I also provided an update on the battlefield situation and the consequences of Russian strikes. We spoke about the situation in the Kursk region, touched on the issue of release of POWs and return of Ukrainian children who were taken by Russian forces. We also discussed the state of Ukraine's air defense and possibility of strengthening it to protect lives. We instructed our teams to resolve technical issues related to implementing and expanding the partial ceasefire. The Ukrainian and American teams are ready to meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to continue coordinating steps towards peace. We instructed our advisors and representatives to carry out this work as quickly as possible. We noted that the positive work of our advisors and representatives, Rubio, Waltz, Kellogg, Yermak, Sabia, Umarov, and Palisa, in further future meetings. The teams can agree on all necessary aspects of advancing towards lasting peace and security guarantees. I thank President Trump and the American people for their support. I stress that Ukrainians want peace, which is why Ukraine accepted the proposal for an unconditional ceasefire. I highlighted the importance of President Trump's concept of peace through strength. We agreed to maintain constant contact, including at the highest level and through our teams. Okay, so my apologies, guys. Lots of reading there, but these were the big statements coming out from the Trump side, the White House, and also from Ukraine, from Volodymyr Zelenskyy. So it's kind of just showing how they're working together right now, trying to move towards full ceasefire. But it does look like the next step right now is potentially going to be partial ceasefire on energy-related facilities inside of Ukraine and Russia. Okay, so now we'll move on to a few other updates I have for you guys here. Now, I showed you this morning, so just in case you guys haven't seen this, this is a statement from Donald Trump today after he spoke to Zelenskyy. So from more translated, Trump stated that his conversation with Zelenskyy has concluded and went very well. Okay, so here's what he stated on Truth Social. Just completed a very good telephone call with President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. It lasted approximately 1 hour. Much of the discussion was based on the call made yesterday with President Putin in order to align both Russia and Ukraine in terms of their requests and needs. We are very much on track, and I will ask Secretary of State Marco Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz to give an accurate description of the points discussed. That statement will be put out shortly, okay? And these were the statements that we kind of just went over here. So just to show you, that's what Trump put out today. Now take a look at this from Max 24. Details of the partial ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia have not yet been agreed. This was according to Sky News today. Despite the White House's statement about the agreement between Kiev and Moscow to stop attacks on energy infrastructure, this does not mean that the partial ceasefire has already come into force. At the moment, the parties have only agreed in principle to this step, but the technical details still need to be clarified. There are no technical conditions yet, and Ukraine have not decided on the issue of control over the ceasefire, so our team and the Americans will work on this, okay? So this makes sense why we saw the attacks happening last night, and I was actually kind of questioning that this morning during our update video with the Russia-Ukraine war, that maybe the ceasefire was not completely in effect yet. That's kind of how it seemed to me. So maybe for some of you guys that thought that I was claiming that, Ukraine was purposely attacking Russia and breaking the ceasefire and whatnot, well, to me, all along, it kind of seemed like there really wasn't a ceasefire in effect, but at the same time, I can kind of see how people would get confused with the statement that Trump put out yesterday, where he stated that there would be an immediate ceasefire on energy facilities, and that was coming from Russia. But at the same time, I think that could get mixed up and maybe seen that way, but also maybe it was just a statement coming out from Putin, and this wasn't actually into effect yet, because Ukraine actually agreed to a full ceasefire. Russia only agreed to a partial. So the fact that these were two separate proposals, maybe there's some sort of conflicting issues here, but just wanted to share that with you guys that that's what Sky News was reporting today, that this partial ceasefire is not even in effect yet. Okay, so right now it's just in principle that things are being agreed on. Now, for Max 24, the Ukraine U.S. minerals deal went beyond just economic agreements and focused on a partial ceasefire. According to the White House also added that in the long term, the deal should lead to a full ceasefire and lasting peace. Okay, so that's big news right here, also, that this whole minerals deal is going to be apparently more than just economic agreements, that it's going to be pushed towards this whole partial ceasefire agreement. It's going to be tied into a ceasefire versus just being economic agreements with the United States. In terms of sharing minerals with the U.S. in exchange for weapons. So that's some big news coming out today. That's a big change in regards to the minerals deal. Now, for Mosa Defender, according to Reuters citing Russia's national daily newspaper Kommersant, Russian President Vladimir Putin would like U.S. President Trump to formally recognize Russia's claim to all regions of eastern Ukraine annexed in September 2022, including Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, as well as the Crimean Peninsula, which was invaded and annexed by Russia in 2014. In exchange for the recognition, Putin has said that he would not lay claim to the Ukrainian port city of Odessa on the Black Sea and other territory in Ukraine. When asked, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov claimed that Putin had not discussed the idea with Trump during their call on Tuesday. Okay, so this reportedly was coming out today that Trump's calling on Putin now to basically recognize the areas that they control. So Crimea and then the four other regions, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions, even though majority of these regions, they don't even control the entirety of them. So again, I don't see how that's going to work out. I mean, I guess the U.S. can try to recognize those if they want to. But at the same time, we know that Ukraine will never recognize these territories as Russian territory, and at some point they may want to try to reclaim them, either diplomatically, or down the road, potentially militarily. Who knows? But that was a huge update today, and we're still continuing to hear from Russian President Vladimir Putin that he wants the U.S. and also Ukraine to recognize these territories that they're controlling. Okay, so this would obviously be in exchange for not attacking Odessa, trying to take over the ports over there, which Odessa has been attacked a lot recently in the past. Finally, one last update from Max 24. Mike Waltz told reporters outside the White House he will hold ceasefire talks with representatives of Ukraine and Russia today, according to Sky News. Shuttle diplomacy is difficult, but we are working at all levels to push both sides to a ceasefire and end this war. Okay, so this is big news too. So it looks like the U.S. still trying right now to get Ukraine and Russia together and start discussing these ceasefire talks. We'll see if we can get this partial ceasefire going here sometime soon, because it looks like right now it's not in effect. So we'll probably still be seeing both sides attacking each other's energy facilities. But it does look like right now, according to this information as of today, the U.S. is pushing Ukraine and Russia right now to start trying to negotiate this deal of some sort of ceasefire, okay? So just wanted to give you guys some updates real quick coming out regarding this phone call and some other updates regarding the whole ceasefire situation. So that's the latest I got for you guys. I want to thank you so much for tuning in for this update. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you with that. Hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.